31 historical myths that turn out to be true. What if everything you thought was legend was actually history with better marketing? Ancient monsters that actually existed, death weapons that defied belief, and lost cities hiding in plain sight. Today, we're diving into 31 myths that historians laughed at until archaeology said, "Hold my trowel." This isn't fantasy. It's reality that was just waiting to be dug up. 1. Viking warriors were actually women. For decades, a Viking grave in Sweden contained what everyone assumed was a legendary male warrior, buried with swords, axes, shields, battle strategy game pieces, and 2 horses. This was clearly a military commander, a strategic genius of the Viking Age. Then in 2017, DNA testing dropped a bombshell. The warrior was female. Not just any woman, but likely a high-ranking military leader who commanded respect and troops. The find shattered centuries of assumptions about Viking gender roles. These weren't just shield maidens from mythology. Women genuinely fought, strategized, and led in Viking society. The myth of warrior women wasn't invented by Marvel Comics or fantasy novels. It was buried in Scandinavia for over 1,000 years, waiting for modern science to prove the sagas right all along. 2. The Kraken was a giant squid. Sailors for centuries told terrifying tales of the Kraken, a sea monster so massive it could drag entire ships to the ocean floor with its tentacles. Maps warned of its territory, and crews refused to sail certain waters. Scientists dismissed it as drunken sailor folklore until they started finding evidence. Giant squids can grow over 40 feet long, with eyes the size of dinner plates and tentacles covered in razor-sharp suckers. When one of these creatures surfaces sick or dying, it looks exactly like the monster from the legends. In 2004, Japanese researchers captured the first photographs of a live giant squid in its natural habitat. The Kraken wasn't mythology. It was marine biology that happened to be absolutely terrifying and living in the deep ocean where nobody could prove it existed until cameras got good enough. 3. Ancient Greeks had a computer. When divers recovered a corroded bronze lump from a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera in 1901, nobody imagined what was inside. For decades it sat in museums, an unexplained curiosity. Then X-rays and CT scans revealed over 30 precisely engineered bronze gears, an analog computer from 100 BC that predicted astronomical positions, tracked eclipses, and calculated the timing of the Olympic Games. It's so sophisticated that nothing comparable appeared again until the 14th century. Scientists are still discovering new functions. This wasn't supposed to exist. Ancient Greeks were supposed to have philosophy and pottery, not precision mechanical engineering that wouldn't be matched for 1,400 years. One shipwreck completely rewrote our understanding of ancient technology. Makes you wonder what else is sitting on the ocean floor. 4. Troy was a real city. Homer's Iliad, with its epic tale of Achilles, Hector, and the famous Trojan horse, was considered beautiful poetry but pure fiction. No serious historian believed Troy actually existed. Then Heinrich Schliemann, a wealthy German businessman obsessed with Homer, decided to take the ancient texts literally. In the 1870s, he started digging at a mound in Turkey where the poem placed Troy. He found not just one city, but 9 layers of cities built on top of each other over millennia. Troy 7, dating to around 1180 BC, showed clear evidence of violent destruction by warfare, exactly when the Trojan War supposedly happened. The wooden horse might be poetic license, but the city was real, the war was real, and the destruction was catastrophic. Ancient poetry turned out to be ancient journalism. 5. Dinosaurs had feathers. For over a century, dinosaurs were portrayed as giant, scaly reptiles, basically supersized lizards. Museum displays, scientific illustrations, and every movie showed them with reptilian skin. Then in the 1990s, paleontologists in China started finding something that changed everything. Fossilized dinosaurs with clear evidence of feathers. Not just primitive fluff, but complex, structured feathers similar to modern birds. Velociraptors, those terrifying hunters from Jurassic Park, were actually covered in feathers and looked more like murderous turkeys than scaly monsters. T-Rex juveniles likely had downy feathers too. The myth that birds evolved from dinosaurs was actually backwards. Birds are dinosaurs, the only lineage that survived the extinction. Every pigeon you see is technically a dinosaur. The monsters of prehistory weren't reptiles at all. They were the original angry birds. 6. The Library of Alexandria's destruction was gradual. History class taught us that the Library of Alexandria, repository of ancient knowledge, burned down in one catastrophic fire, destroying humanity's greatest collection of wisdom forever. It's one of history's most tragic single moments, right? Wrong. The dramatic story of Caesar accidentally burning it during his Egyptian campaign in 48 BC is only part of the truth. The library actually declined over centuries through multiple smaller fires, budget cuts, political instability, and changing priorities. By the time any final destruction happened, most of the collection had already been dispersed, copied, or lost to neglect. The myth of one dramatic burning makes a better story, but reality was far more mundane and depressing. Death by 1,000 cuts and bureaucratic indifference. Ancient wisdom wasn't dramatically destroyed by flames. It was slowly defunded to death. 7. Gladiators were celebrities, not just slaves. Movies show gladiators as desperate slaves fighting to the death for bloodthirsty crowds. While many were prisoners or slaves, the reality was far more complex. Successful gladiators were massive celebrities, the ancient equivalent of professional athletes or WWE wrestlers. They had fan clubs, endorsement deals, and groupies. Graffiti from Pompeii literally calls specific gladiators heartthrobs and the delight of all the girls. They trained in elite schools, followed specific weight diets, and fights were carefully choreographed to maximize entertainment while minimizing actual deaths. Those trained fighters were expensive investments. Some free men actually volunteered to become gladiators for the fame and fortune. The arena was brutal, yes, but it was also show business. Ancient Rome's version of pay-per-view, where the stars got rich and famous before potentially dying dramatically. The ultimate high-risk, high-reward career. 8. There were female pharaohs in Egypt. Ancient Egypt was supposed to be a rigid patriarchy where women had no real power, right? Cleopatra was the exception that proved the rule. Except historians kept finding evidence of other female pharaohs that didn't fit the narrative. Hatshepsut ruled Egypt for over 20 years as a full pharaoh, not a queen regent, but an actual pharaoh with all the titles and power. She even wore the traditional fake beard in official portraits. Her successors tried to erase her from history, chiseling her name off monuments. Then there's Sobinfru, Nefertiti, who may have ruled as pharaoh, and several others. DNA testing and archaeological evidence keep revealing more. Women didn't just influence Egyptian politics from behind the scenes. They sometimes sat on the throne itself, wearing the double crown and commanding armies. The patriarchy tried to erase them from history. Modern archaeology keeps bringing them back. 9. Pompeii victims weren't frozen in time. The haunting plaster casts of Pompeii victims, people seemingly frozen mid-scream as Vesuvius erupted, are some of archaeology's most powerful images. They look like they were instantly preserved by volcanic ash, right? Not exactly. When Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, most victims died from pyroclastic surges, superheated gas, and rock that killed instantly. Their bodies were buried in ash and pumice, which hardened around them. Over centuries, the bodies decomposed, leaving human-shaped cavities in the volcanic rock. In the 1800s, archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli had a genius idea: pour plaster into these cavities. The frozen victims we see in museums are actually plaster casts made 1,700 years after the eruption. They're accurate recreations based on the voids left behind, but not the actual bodies. The myth of instant preservation was actually Victorian-era casting innovation. Still haunting, just not quite how we imagined. 10. Medieval people weren't actually filthy. Pop culture loves depicting medieval Europe as a cesspool where nobody ever bathed and everyone stank constantly. It's basically a historical fact, right? Completely wrong. Medieval people were actually quite concerned with cleanliness. Public bathhouses were common in cities. People washed regularly, especially hands and faces before meals. Soap was widely manufactured and used. Clothing was washed frequently. Teeth were cleaned with cloths and various pastes. The myth of medieval filthiness largely comes from Victorian moralists who were weirdly obsessed with depicting the past as barbaric to make their own era seem enlightened. Some medieval medical advice about bathing was questionable, sure, but the idea that people wallowed in their own filth for months is fantasy. They weren't modern-level hygienic, but they weren't the unwashed masses we imagine. Historical fanfiction, basically invented by people who wanted to feel superior to their ancestors. 11. Ninjas didn't wear black. Every ninja in every movie wears black pajamas and sneaks around at night. It's iconic. It's also completely wrong. Real ninjas, shinobi, in feudal Japan typically disguised themselves as farmers, merchants, or monks. They wore whatever helped them blend into their environment, which was rarely all black. The black outfit myth comes from Japanese theater, specifically kabuki and bunraku puppet shows. Stagehands and move props wore all black, a convention meaning pretend this person is invisible. When plays featured ninja characters, they dressed them in black to visually communicate this person moves unseen. Audiences understood the theatrical convention. Later generations saw these plays and thought it was historical accuracy. Real ninja tactics focused on intelligence, gathering, and blending in, not dramatic nighttime acrobatics. The truth is way less cinematic. They were essentially medieval spies and saboteurs who succeeded by looking completely normal. Black pajamas would have gotten them killed immediately. 12. Cleopatra wasn't Egyptian. Cleopatra is the icon of ancient Egypt, right? The ultimate Egyptian queen, embodiment of Egyptian royalty and mystique. Except she wasn't ethnically Egyptian at all. She was Macedonian Greek, descended from Ptolemy I, one of Alexander the Great's generals who took over Egypt after Alexander died. The Ptolemaic dynasty ruled Egypt for 300 years, but kept their bloodline pure through lots of sibling marriage. Cleopatra's family tree is more of a family wreath. What made Cleopatra remarkable wasn't her ethnicity, but that she was the first Ptolemaic ruler who actually bothered to learn Egyptian and engage with Egyptian culture. Her predecessors ruled Egypt for centuries while speaking only Greek and living in their own cultural bubble. She was brilliant, politically savvy, and multilingual. But the face of ancient Egypt was actually a Greek colonizer who was just better at PR than her ancestors. History's ultimate cultural appropriation success story. 13. Medieval armor wasn't impossibly heavy. Every movie shows knights in armor barely able to move, needing cranes to mount horses, and immediately drowning if they fell in water. It's why they lost battles, right? Completely false. A full suit of well-fitted plate armor weighed about 45 to 55 pounds, less than modern soldiers carry in combat gear. The weight was distributed across the entire body, making it relatively easy to move in. Knights could run, jump, climb ladders, and mount horses unassisted. There are medieval illustrations and modern demonstrations showing armored fighters doing gymnastics and handstands. The myth comes partly from ceremonial parade armor, which was ridiculously heavy and ornamental, being confused with battle armor, and partly from Victorian writers who wanted medieval people to seem primitive. Real armor was an engineering marvel, protective but mobile. Knights were athletes, not immobilized tin cans. They'd probably find modern military gear more restrictive. Medieval technology was legitimately impressive, just not Hollywood-friendly. 14. Emperor Nero didn't fiddle while Rome burned. Nero fiddled while Rome burned is one of history's most famous images of callous leadership. The mad emperor playing music while his city turned to ash. Perfect villain moment. Completely fictional. First, fiddles didn't exist yet. they wouldn't be invented for another 1,000 years. Second, when the Great Fire of Rome erupted in 64 AD, Nero wasn't even in the city. He was at his villa in Antium. When he heard the news, he rushed back and personally coordinated relief efforts, opened his gardens to refugees, and arranged food supplies for the displaced. He even paid for rebuilding efforts from his own treasury. The myth was propaganda spread by his political enemies and early Christians, who he persecuted. They painted him as literally playing music during the disaster. In reality, he responded like a competent emergency manager. History's character assassination was so effective that we still repeat the lie 2,000 years later. Nero was terrible in other ways, but this particular myth is pure slander. 15. Vikings didn't have horned helmets. Quick, picture a Viking. You're seeing a bearded warrior with a horned helmet, right? That image is burned into popular culture. Museums, movies, sports teams, everyone knows Vikings wore horned helmets. Except they absolutely didn't. Not one Viking helmet with horns has ever been found archaeologically. The few Viking helmets discovered are simple, practical designs. Rounded metal caps that protected the head without giving enemies convenient handles to grab. So where the horns come from? Blame 19th century romantic nationalism and an 1876 opera production of Wagner's Der Ring, Der Nibelungen. The costume designer thought horns looked dramatic and Norse-y. The look caught on because it was visually striking. Earlier, some ancient non-Viking Germanic and Celtic ceremonial items had horns, and people conflated cultures. Real Vikings were practical warriors who understood that protruding decorations on helmets were tactically stupid. The iconic Viking look is basically 19th century cosplay that everyone mistook for history. 16. Great Wall of China isn't visible from space. This fact appears in textbooks, tour guides, and has been repeated by teachers for generations. The Great Wall of China is the only man-made structure visible from space with a naked eye. It's proof of human engineering prowess reaching cosmic scales. It's also completely false. Astronauts have repeatedly confirmed you can't see the Great Wall from orbit without assistance. It's narrow, irregular, and blends into the landscape. Chinese astronaut Yang Liwei specifically went looking for it during his 2003 mission and couldn't spot it. The myth likely started before anyone had actually been to space. Just speculation that sounded plausible. With telescopes or photography, sure, you can pick it out, but you can also see highways, airports, and cities that way. The truth? Lots of human structures are visible from space, and the Great Wall isn't particularly special in that regard. We've been repeating confident nonsense about space visibility since before we could actually check. 17. Marie Antoinette never said, "Let them eat cake." "Let them eat cake" is one of history's most famous quotes, perfectly capturing aristocratic cluelessness. When told peasants had no bread, Marie Antoinette supposedly suggested they eat cake instead. It's the ultimate out-of-touch rich person moment, used to justify the French Revolution's violence against her. She never said it. The phrase appears in Jean-Jacques Rousseau's autobiography, written when Marie Antoinette was a child, attributed to Great Princess, clearly not her. It was probably already a stock phrase mocking royal ignorance long before the French Revolution. Revolutionaries just attached it to Marie Antoinette retroactively because she made a convenient villain. In reality, she was actually somewhat charitable and concerned with social issues, though obviously living in absurd luxury. She had plenty of real flaws without needing fabricated quotes. But "let them eat cake" was such perfect propaganda that it stuck forever. History's most famous fake quote, still taught as fact, still used as shorthand for privilege. The French Revolution's greatest PR success. 18. Einstein didn't fail math. The myth that Einstein failed math as a student is weirdly persistent, used to comfort struggling students and prove that even geniuses can struggle with basics before succeeding. Inspiring story. Totally false. Einstein was exceptional at mathematics from childhood. By age 15, he had mastered differential and integral calculus. His grades in math and physics were consistently excellent. The myth has several possible origins. Einstein once saw a newspaper article claiming he'd failed math and found it amusing. His school used a grading system that was later reversed, so a 1, highest grade, in his report card looked like failing to people unfamiliar with the system. And a biographer might have misinterpreted some of Einstein's own quotes about struggling with formal education. He disliked rote learning and authoritarian teaching styles, but excelled at actual mathematics. The truth is Einstein was always brilliant at math. The myth persists because people want to believe genius can emerge from failure. Sometimes it does, just not in Einstein's case. He was always the smart kid who was exactly as special as he seemed. 19. Napoleon wasn't actually short. Napoleon complex refers to short men overcompensating with aggressive behavior, named after Napoleon Bonaparte, who was supposedly tiny. Everyone knows Napoleon was a little guy, maybe 5 feet tall, with huge ambitions to compensate. Except he wasn't short at all. Napoleon was about 5 feet 7 inches, 170 centimeters, which was average or slightly above average for French men of his era. The confusion comes from multiple sources. French and British measurement systems were different, leading to numerical confusion. British propaganda deliberately portrayed him as tiny to mock him. His nickname, Le Petit Caporal, the Little Corporal, was actually a term of endearment from his soldiers, referring to his camaraderie, not his height. He also surrounded himself with elite guards who were selected for being tall, making him look shorter in comparison. The British won the propaganda war so thoroughly that we still believe their caricatures 200 years later. Napoleon had plenty of complexes worth analyzing. Height wasn't one of them. He was a regular-sized guy with enormous ambitions. The complex named after him is based on complete fiction. 20. Medieval Europeans knew the Earth was round. The myth that medieval people thought the Earth was flat until Columbus proved otherwise is taught in schools and repeated constantly. Before the Renaissance, everyone was supposedly ignorant and superstitious, believing in a flat Earth. Then brave explorers proved them wrong. This is almost entirely false. Educated people had known the Earth was round since ancient Greece. Eratosthenes calculated Earth's circumference with remarkable accuracy in 240 BC. Medieval scholars, including church authorities, knew and taught that Earth was spherical. University textbooks from the 1200s clearly describe a spherical Earth. Sailors certainly knew. You can literally watch ships disappear over the horizon hull first. The flat Earth myth was invented in the 1800s by writers who wanted to make medieval people seem ignorant and position modernity as enlightened by comparison. Columbus wasn't proving Earth was round. Everyone knew that. He was wrong about Earth's size, actually. He thought it was much smaller than scholars correctly calculated. The flat Earth myth is itself a myth, created to make the past look stupider than it was. 21. Carrots don't actually improve your night vision. This sounds like nutrition science. Carrots are rich in vitamin A, which supports eye health. Therefore, eating carrots improves your vision, especially at night. Doctors confirm it, parents tell kids, and everyone accepts it. The truth is weirder. It's World War II propaganda. British RAF pilots were incredibly effective at shooting down German bombers at night. The Nazis couldn't figure out how they were so successful in darkness. The real answer: the British had secretly developed effective radar technology. To hide this, British intelligence started a disinformation campaign claiming their pilots ate lots of carrots for superior night vision. They encouraged the public to eat carrots with the same claim. Rationing vegetables were plentiful. The Germans bought it. The British public bought it. We still believe it today. Vitamin A deficiency can cause night blindness. So there's a grain of truth, but eating extra carrots won't give you superpowers. The entire modern myth exists because British intelligence ran one of history's most successful food-based psyops. Military deception became nutritional fact that won't die. 22. Witches weren't burned at the stake in Salem. The Salem witch trials are synonymous with burning witches at the stake, the iconic image of witch hunting hysteria. History classes teach it, Halloween decorations depict it, and everyone knows it happened in Salem. Except not a single person was burned at the stake during the Salem witch trials. 0. In 1692 to 1693 Salem, 19 people were hanged. One man was pressed to death with stones, refusing to enter a plea, and several died in prison. Burning wasn't the execution method used in English colonial America. That was a European practice, specifically favored in Germanic regions and less common in England itself. English law preferred hanging. The myth conflates Salem with European witch hunts and gets both the location and method wrong. Salem was horrific, a genuine miscarriage of justice driven by hysteria, false accusations, and institutional failure. But the details matter. The iconic burning, which imagery comes from European practices, medieval folklore, and later artistic depictions that merged different historical events into one nightmare scenario. Salem's actual horrors were terrible enough without adding fictional execution methods that make better visuals. 23. Columbus didn't discover America. This is the big one that finally made it into textbooks. Columbus discovered America in 1492, except indigenous peoples had lived there for over 15,000 years. Vikings established settlements around 1000 AD, and Columbus himself never actually set foot on continental North America. His voyages hit Caribbean islands and parts of Central and South America. He thought he'd reached Asia until he died. The myth persists because discovery was defined from a European perspective. Columbus's voyage connected the Americas to European awareness and started permanent colonization and exploitation. That's historically significant, yes, but discovery is wildly inaccurate. The Americas had complex civilizations, millions of people, advanced agriculture, impressive architecture, and sophisticated trade networks. They weren't discovered, they were invaded and colonized. The Columbus myth reflects whose perspective counted in history books. We're slowly correcting it, calling it contact or encounter instead of discovery. But Columbus Day is still a federal holiday in some places, celebrating a guy who never reached the mainland, committed atrocities, and whose main historical achievement was getting lost in the most consequential way possible. 24. George Washington's teeth weren't wooden. George Washington had terrible teeth and wore dentures. That's historically accurate. The famous story that his false teeth were carved from wood is a charming bit of rustic Americana. It's also completely false. Washington had multiple sets of dentures made from far more disturbing materials. Human teeth, likely from slaves, animal teeth, horse and donkey, ivory, and metal. The dentures were uncomfortable, painful, and didn't fit well, which is why Washington looks so dour in portraits. His mouth hurt constantly. The wooden teeth myth probably comes from ivory dentures that became stained over time, taking on a wood grain appearance, or from hippo ivory, which has a grainy texture. The reality is far more uncomfortable than the myth. Washington literally wore teeth extracted from enslaved people. That's not charming Revolutionary-era ingenuity. It's a reminder that even founding fathers participated in slavery in ways that extended to physically wearing parts of enslaved people's bodies. The wooden teeth myth is gentler, more palatable, and completely false. History often is more disturbing than the sanitized versions we inherit. 25. Medieval people didn't use chastity belts. The medieval chastity belt, a locked metal device forcing female fidelity while husbands went off to war, is a staple of historical comedy and cringe. Museums display them, history books mention them, and the image is burned into pop culture. Knights locked up their wives before heading to the Crusades, right? Almost certainly not. There's virtually no medieval evidence these devices existed or were used. The few medieval chastity belts in museums are either Renaissance-era joke items made as novelties or 18th and 19th century fakes created for the growing antiquities market. The myth comes from Victorian-era writers who loved portraying medieval people as barbaric and sexually repressive. They invented or exaggerated practices to make their own era seem enlightened. Some descriptions in medieval literature might be satirical or metaphorical, not literal. The physics of actually wearing one would cause massive infection and injury. Medieval people were many things, but they understood basic hygiene well enough to realize metal underwear was a terrible idea. The chastity belt myth says more about Victorian sexual anxieties and need to feel superior than about actual medieval practices. 26. The Forbidden City wasn't actually forbidden. The Forbidden City in Beijing gets its dramatic name because supposedly nobody could enter on pain of death. A mysterious palace compound so exclusive that commoners who glimpsed it were executed. The name alone creates an image of impenetrable secrecy. Reality was far more bureaucratic. Forbidden City is a Western translation that makes it sound more dramatic than the Chinese name Zijin Sheng, which means Purple Forbidden City, referring to the purple star Polaris in Chinese astronomy, associated with the Heavenly Emperor. Yes, it was the imperial palace, and ordinary citizens couldn't just wander in uninvited, but thousands of people actually lived and worked there: servants, officials, guards, craftsmen, eunuchs. It was more like a gated community for government administration than a mythical sealed-off realm. Controlled access, sure, but not the absolute isolation the Western name implies. The myth makes better tourism marketing. Reasonably secure administrative complex where lots of people worked doesn't have the same ring. We romanticize the forbidden aspect while the reality was bureaucratic palace life with strict social hierarchies. Still fascinating, just less mystical than the name suggests. 27. Medieval castles didn't have moats full of sewage. Pop culture loves depicting medieval castle moats as disgusting sewage-filled ditches, the ultimate in primitive sanitation. Defenders would dump waste into the moat, creating a foul barrier that smelled as bad as it defended. It's gross, memorable, and reinforces every stereotype about medieval hygiene. It's also wrong. Castle moats were typically filled with clean water, either diverted from rivers or allowed to collect naturally. Water was the point. It created a barrier against siege weapons, prevented tunneling, and complicated attacks. Some moats were even stocked with fish, providing fresh food during sieges. Sewage in the moat would contaminate the castle's own water supply, spread disease to the inhabitants, and create unbearable smells for the people living there. Medieval people understood cause and effect. They had waste disposal systems, cesspits, drainage channels, designated areas that were designed to move waste away from living spaces, not create a ring of feces around your home. The sewage moat myth comes from the same Victorian mindset that portrayed medieval people as filthy barbarians. Real castles were actually fairly sophisticated in their sanitation, water management, and defensive design. 28. The Boston Tea Party wasn't about tax rates. American history teaches that colonists dumped tea in Boston Harbor because they opposed high British taxes, taxation without representation. The Boston Tea Party was a protest against excessive tax rates imposed by the Crown. Liberty-loving Americans refused to pay unfair levies. That's the patriotic version. The actual economics were weirder. The Tea Act of 1773 actually lowered the price of British East India Company tea by removing middlemen and reducing taxes. The cheaper tea threatened established colonial merchants, including smugglers of Dutch tea, who'd built businesses on the existing system. The taxation without representation issue was real, but the immediate trigger was that legal British tea was about to become cheaper than smuggled alternatives, destroying profitable smuggling operations. It was partly legitimate constitutional principle, partly economic self-interest protecting existing business models. The Sons of Liberty included merchants who stood to lose money. The protest was sophisticated political theater targeting corporate monopoly and representative governance issues, but it's historically inaccurate to present it as simply opposing high taxes. It was colonial businessmen protecting their interests using powerful political rhetoric. History is rarely as simple or noble as national mythology requires. 29. Blackbeard the pirate's fearsome reputation was mostly PR. Edward Teach, known as Blackbeard, is history's most terrifying pirate. Wild beard with burning fuses woven into it, brutal killer who massacred victims without mercy. His very appearance was nightmare fuel. The burning beard thing was real. He'd light slow-burning fuses in his hair before battle, surrounding himself with smoke and sparks. But here's the thing. There's no verified historical record of Blackbeard actually killing anyone until his final battle, where he was killed himself. His entire fearsome reputation was essentially brilliant branding and psychological warfare. He looked absolutely terrifying on purpose, so ships would surrender without fighting. Why risk your crew and cargo fighting a demon pirate when you could just hand over the goods and live? It worked spectacularly. Most of his victims surrendered immediately. When ships did fight, Blackbeard typically captured them with minimal violence. He was running a business, not indulging in murder. The truth is Blackbeard might have been one of history's least violent famous pirates. His genius was understanding that reputation and terror were more effective than actual violence. History's greatest pirate was essentially a performance artist who scared people into compliance. Better marketing than musket balls. 30. The Rosetta Stone isn't special for its content. The Rosetta Stone is one of the most famous archaeological finds in history. The key that unlocked ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics after centuries of mystery. Museums showcase it, and it's synonymous with linguistic breakthroughs. But here's the ironic truth. The actual text on the stone is incredibly boring. It's a decree from 196 BC praising teenage Pharaoh Ptolemy V for tax exemptions he granted to priests. It's basically an ancient tax receipt and propaganda document. Incredibly mundane, administrative content. The stone's fame comes entirely from how the message was written, not what it said. The same boring tax decree appears 3 times in different scripts: ancient Greek, Egyptian hieroglyphics, and Demotic script. Since scholars could read ancient Greek, they could finally compare the known text with unknown hieroglyphics, cracking the code. It's like finding a takeout menu printed in English and unknown alien script. The menu content doesn't matter. It's the translation key. The Rosetta Stone's historical importance is purely as a linguistic tool. The ancient Egyptians created it as routine propaganda. Its significance was completely accidental. Nobody intended it to be a translation breakthrough thousands of years later. 31. Sharks existed before trees. This fact sounds like an internet joke, but is completely, mind-blowingly true. Sharks have existed for approximately 400 million years, appearing in the Devonian period. Trees, specifically the kind with woody tissue and significant height, evolved around 350 million years ago. Sharks predate trees by roughly 50 million years. Let that sink in. For tens of millions of years, sharks swam through ancient oceans while the land was covered in fungi, ferns, and small plants, but nothing we'd recognize as a tree. Sharks are older than Saturn's rings, older than the Polaris, North Star, in its current position, and far older than grass, which only evolved around 70 million years ago. They survived multiple mass extinction events that wiped out dinosaurs and countless other species. They're fundamentally so successful in evolutionary terms that their basic design hasn't needed major changes. While everything around them evolved, went extinct, and was replaced multiple times, sharks just kept swimming. They're living fossils in the best way. Perfectly adapted apex predators that have been terrorizing the ocean since before trees existed. When you're afraid of sharks, remember, they've been perfecting being scary longer than forests have existed. So there you have it, 31 myths that turn out to be historical receipts. From warrior women to mathematical geniuses, from legendary monsters that were actually just weird fish to castles that weren't as gross as movies claimed. History keeps surprising us, and archaeology keeps proving that the myths we dismiss might just be facts we haven't dug up yet. Here's my question for you. Which myth shocked you the most? Are you team, how do we not know sharks are older than trees? Or team, wait, the Boston Tea Party was basically a business dispute? Drop your answer in the comments. And hey, what other myths do you think might actually be true? Ancient aliens? Atlantis? That thing your weird uncle insists happened? Let me know what you want us to investigate next. If you made it this far, smash that like button subscribe for more history that sounds fake but isn't, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss when we inevitably discover that some other impossible myth was just archaeologists not looking hard enough. History isn't dead. It's just waiting to surprise us again. See you in the next one.